Hello, my name's Tom Carhill. Date's the 15th of October 2013. I'd just like to explain about something that I've observed, which I find quite confusing, that people haven't caught on to. It's been on terrestrial British TV. Fair enough, it's got subtitles, which didn't help. It was an Italian programme, and it was all about the Bologna bombing. Now, that was on quite a long time ago. It predated the 7/7 false flag, which I would suggest was a continuation of the stay behinds, aka the Operation Gladio or Operation Gladio-esque missions that the stay behinds were partaking in the 60s and the 70s to, basically start problems such as bombs, such as the Bologna bombing, which has now been admitted was done by right-wing elements within the Italian establishment, to blame it on the external threat. At the time it was communists, and therefore they went around murdering people, women and children, and also actually coppers. They actually killed a lot of they actually targeted policemen in Italy, blew them up, to blame it on the communists. There were no communists, but it's just a made up story, as the way these things go. Now, that was called Operation Gladio. Now, if you type in Operation Gladio into Google, you'll see a picture of a sword, a Greek sword, like a hoplite sword. I forget what they're called, but it's that kind of curvy sword that sort of goes like that, facing upwards with fire in the background, sort of parachute across it. Sometimes it's got an anchor in the background. The point is, that's the Operation Gladio sign, a sword, Greek sword pointing upwards. Again, they're quite unique Greek swords. I mean, they're not, they're slightly distinct looking. Now, if you move forward in time, you've obviously got the 7/7 bombings. Now, that was one of the biggest balls up in history. Now, obviously, whenever you get a balls up on a false flag incident, there's a lot of people who say, oh, it's just a balls up, they're incompetent. And then there's other people who say, well, they're not really incompetent. That's just an announcement of what they're doing, and it's just a range test to see how stupid the public are to not catch on to see it's a false flag. So they deliberately do something to make it obvious what they're doing. So for a start off, like Freemasonic elements will realise what's going on, and they'll keep their mouths shut if they actually saw something. For instance, if you had a contract for, say, one of the tube companies, and you knew that, for instance, if that guy had gone down that tunnel into that train station because you did all the security cameras, you'd be able to say, well, of course, we must have footage, and you'd know where to get them on the computer system, where it was backed up, of course, not with the security cameras, because they're all run by Verint Systems, and they're an Israeli company. So, obviously, when you know who really blows things up and blames it on other people, the Israelis are the biggest, they're the masters of that. But then I would suggest, despite the fact they blew up that big hotel in Israel, when Israel was first founded with a load of British soldiers in, and blamed it on, and they were dressed as Arabs. Then, despite the fact, ever since the start of their state, they based it on false flag terrorism, and the Mossad's little motto is, isn't it, by way of deception, we will wage war by deception. There's even been a book called By Way of Deception. I believe the guy who wrote it got assassinated. I know they do assassinate lots of authors, the Mossad do. But anyway, the fact that all the cameras in the underground are all run by Mossad, and all of our listening stations in England, it's all run by Israel, so it's all listened into by the Israeli state, and that seems to be completely fine. And the Israeli government has openly employs people who did things like blew up that King David hotel, and they become the prime minister of the country and stuff like that. I mean, it beggars belief that people are stupid enough to not think that something incredibly suspect, allowing a state that's based on terrorism, that invented the term ethnic cleansing. They thought it was like completely acceptable. They were calling it ethnic cleansing at the time. It was like seen as a kind of a sort of word to sort of lighten the blow of just going around murdering people to scare them, terrorise them out of their homes. So they're a state based on false flag terrorism, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, racism, and basically anything. Like just anything goes there. They actually run. They clearly have a lot to do with a lot of these things that go, these big disasters that happen in these countries. Now, the point is that you've got the Force Reconnaissance Regiment now, or they call the Special Reconnaissance Regiment, and in Iraq, there were these soldiers who got caught shooting, dressed up as Arabs, with a load of bombs in a car, shooting at Iraqi coalition, sort of, you know, basically Iraqi traitors who've come on board with the evil empire. They were, but that is technically our side. They were going around shooting them up. They got captured, and then the English sent in like loads of tanks and all sorts of stuff, killed loads of Iraqis to break them out of prison. Now, the reason they had to get them out of prison, turns out they weren't in the SAS, these guys. They were in the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. Now, Special Reconnaissance Regiment has something to do with Int 14. Int 14 was a regiment that was active in Northern Ireland up until quite recently, and they were trained in bomb making, and basically they would be deep infiltrators. And what they would do, because I knew some people who told me about, you know, people they know who'd gone in it, and what they would do is they'd be allowed to stay working in a chip shop or in a pub, and they'd basically just be a kind of, they'd be allowed to take the wage, they'd be still on the British Army payroll, and then every now and again they'd be asked to like look for some intelligence. So they were just drawing, I don't know if they were drawing sort of special forces people as well, but they were definitely drawing just normal soldiers could join it. But it was just incredibly dangerous, because if you got caught, obviously, you know, probably tortured to death or whatever. And but the fact is that, you know, lots of people were involved with it, but they did train them in bomb making and all sorts of dodgy stuff like that. Now, what on earth are you training a kind of undercover intelligence gatherer in bomb making? Turns out, in Iraq, they had these people shooting at Iraqis and shooting at basically our own side, because they were the Iraqis were meant to be on our side. Now, if you look at the Special Reconnaissance Regiment logo, it's a hoplites helmet with a Greek sword pointing upwards. Right, so you've got Operation Gladio with a Greek sword pointing upwards. Then you've got the Special Reconnaissance Regiment with a Greek sword pointing upwards. Operation Gladio involved blowing up our own stuff and blaming it on the evil evildoers, who we must all be scared of. And now the Special Reconnaissance Regiment are involved with, blowing things up and blowing it on the latest wrongdoers. Now, I would suggest that the fact these signs are so incredibly similar, if you put them into Google, the two words, you've got Operation Gladio, put an image search, you'll see it. You go to Special Reconnaissance Regiment, you'll see the same thing. So why are they using the same sign? I suggest that they're doing this to rub it in people's faces, right? So you've got 7-7 blowing up big stations, potato masher bombs, killing loads of people. Then you've got 7-7 things getting blown up. There was never a day in history where they officially recognised Operation Gladio as happening, but they never kind of officially explained when it had happened. Like all those weapons caches that were left around Europe, I don't believe they ever went around decommissioning them. Maybe they did, but they never made a big public thing of it. In Northern Ireland, it's a fact that they've never actually really convicted anyone. I mean, there was anti-equipment and anti-building damage. People did blow stuff up. They'd phone in a warning. There'd be a code word. They'd blow up buildings because they've been serving English soldiers and stuff like that. But the idea that people have been going around blowing up civilian targets with civilians in, there was never a single case of that ever happening where it was ever pinned on anybody. All of those attacks were all conducted by the security services. Right now, when you put together the fact that Tony Adams, his brother, had been raping his own daughter, and it turns out Tony Adams' dad had also been a paedophile. And you've got to remember that Tony Adams, when he used to be on telly when I was younger, he used to have this voice put over him, and it was like this kind of, he's so evil, we won't be allowed to put him on the telly. Now, if you look back at that, you sort of think it was completely ridiculous at the time, and everyone used to say it's very strange, and they were saying they just wouldn't give terrorists a voice on the telly and that. But the thing with Tony Adams is, and this is like a step before that, I used to always say to people, well, that guy, he looks really creepy. Look, if you've got a cause which you're trying to support, and it's going to be accused of being very suspect and dodgy because, you know, it's apparently a terrorism organisation, wouldn't you like try and get, you know, obviously it's a legitimate cause, Britain's got no business in Ireland at all. Obviously then, of course, it changes because then you get lots of British people who are Protestants going and living there for years and years and years, and, you know, generation after generation. Eventually it gets to the point where you say, well, what are you going to do? They've got nowhere to go now, so if the population of them's more, well, what are we going to do? Going to just like ship them back to Scotland or England or something? It becomes very difficult. So I appreciate there's two sides to it. But the point is, if there's a legitimate cause, which there was, why would you get somebody who looks so incredibly, I mean, like, Irish people and English people are probably, they're quite similar looking, but the point is, you know, like, if you were trying to get a front person for an organisation such as Sinn Féin or the IRA, why would you get someone who looks so incredibly fucked up looking? He's ugly, he's creepy looking, he's got this beard that sort of goes right up to underneath his eyes. I used to always think it was very, very strange. And I remember when I went to university, there was lots of Irish at the university, because I was in John Moores, Liverpool John Moores, and I'd say to them, yeah, but why don't they get like a decent front man? Why don't they get someone, you know, I've always found it very weird. Why do they use him? He just looks like a creepy freak. And they'd always be, you know, the way a lot of Irish people are very, very, very defensive. So even if you say something that's kind of like a suggestion, you know, that why are they doing that? It seems a bit strange. They just stick up for anything that's Irish. You know, they love U2, they love this. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And you just think, oh, fucking hell, it's Irish, so it must be good. The same old bollocks. Well, why don't you live in Ireland? You know, I'm Irish descent, but this is the bollocks you have to put up with. A lot of Irish find it extremely irritating themselves. So you'll know the kind of thing. Anyway, the fact is, it became very, very clear to me. I didn't know about that story about his brother breaking, but I always thought he looked like a pedo. Then it turns out his dad's a pedo, his brother's a pedo. You think, fucking hell, they're a pedo family. Now, we know how things are controlled in England. They use paedophiles to do jobs because they've got the dirt on them, and they can, you know, string them out whenever they want, so they can use them, they can completely control them. So the whole point is, all of these things that have happened recently, you've got the false flag terrorism, you've got the paedophiles running things, you've got the blackmail that's clearly happening over these people, and people still can't thread it all together. And I just find it absolutely incredible that people can't see that, despite the fact it might sound a bit far-fetched, now it's actually being completely proven, and people, they just don't really seem to be able to link it together. It was also quite interesting a little while ago. Martin McGuinness, who was, for people who don't know, he was the kind of the deputy head of the IRA. He's this ginger guy, looks a bit angry, looks a bit like it's sort of an angry ginger, a bit curly hair like. And what happened with him was, he was reported as saying that anybody who doesn't believe that the war is over, this is the war obviously to make, well, you would have thought, make Ireland independent from Britain. Anyone who doesn't think the war is over is a traitor to the cause. Now, what business has he got telling people who've been fighting for maybe a couple of 100 years to make Ireland free from England? Well, I suppose it's been a continuing battle for maybe more than 1,000 years. What business has he got saying that the war aims have just changed because he's just said so, and you're a traitor if you don't agree that it's over? Quite clearly, Martin McGuinness and Gerry Adams are working for the British government, have always been working for the British government, just like Tim Osman, aka Osama bin Laden, who used to work for the CIA, and Saddam Hussein, who also used to work for the CIA, and all of these other people, these demonisation figures that get set up, even the ones who are more closer to home and had a bit more of a plausible story, such as the IRA. I just can't see how people can't see that the leaders of these organisations, they're all totally controlled by the British government. It's quite clear that they are. And virtually every country we go in to invade, it turns out that the people who will actually run in the country, we put them there anyway. So, I don't know. It's just weird how people don't catch on to this. I just find it a bit strange. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.